monolithic black towers observe as the travellers gradually, piece by piece, uncover the truth of their world, concealed as it is behind a thick layer of ash. Having fixed communications between the two structures and discovered an unstoppable drilling machine, our travellers turn their thoughts now to what lies beneath. They decide the only way they might be able to talk to GAIRS and maybe to someone else who might have an idea and understanding of what's going on and the significance of what they've achieved, they'll have to go back to Tropland. As they head back towards the town, the sound of mining, of drilling, of the huge, cumbersome machines from earlier making their way closer and closer into the volcano rings out ominously. Ollie strides up to the building which they came from and finds the door open. A little bit suspicious. The four of them make their way in, and they find that all of their doors are open as they left them, and yet the door that Vlad came out of is now closed, and so making their way inside, they find Vlad miraculously back on his bed, plugged once again into Tropland.
But yeah, now we found him all hooked up and plugged into the thing.
The thing that we did not know what
Yes.
it was, but at that point I think we were just going Matrix. Didn't Ollie want to unplug him?
Oh, that might be it, yeah.
Not just want to.
He did.
Oh yeah, he just unplugs me. God, I
Didn't think there was any risk.
Someone rolled as well. Like I had to roll as well for my survival.
I didn't think there was any risk. I thought it was going to be alright.
Well, haven't you seen Matrix, dude?
This wasn't the Matrix.
Don't you remember when they unplug someone, they just die?
Vlad then rolled for his life.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds right.
I
Normal.
feel like this is Ollie's revenge for
Yeah.
Vlad, like, throwing him through the world.
No, I didn't think that Ollie necessarily had any negative intentions, but whatever he was doing was dangerous. But luckily, after all things had occurred, Vlad was fine.
Before Vlad can so much as complain, Ollie grabs the cable, stuffs his head back onto it, and once again Vlad finds himself awake in Tropland. The rest of them go back to the rooms that they originated from, they plug themselves all back in, and find themselves together once more in the wedding hall. The king and Miranda have barely moved. They're still waiting for the wedding to happen. Having finally returned to Tropland, Jamie isn't very happy at his lack of powers. Chris has figured out that he can change into whatever person he likes, although he hasn't used it very much to any advantage. Ollie has his flashbang, which he's used occasionally. Vlad is very much enjoying his ability to apparently make people fall through the planet. And Liv has apparently got some sort of console access, which makes random things happen when she presses the weird symbols that are on her body. Jamie doesn't know what his power is. Maybe he can phase shift or something? So, thoroughly fed up with being left out of all of this excitement.
So I have to stand there for a while and do some funny things. So I think we tried again all of the different combinations of whatever.
Touching
shoulders, knees and toes.
Yeah.
Knees and toes. Yeah. And that wasn't particularly successful until I can't remember what exactly triggered it.
I think he just ran into the wall
Yeah.
and hit his forehead onto the wall, and then he just managed to get through the wall or something like that.
He runs straight at it and collides straight with the hard stone, but as he falls backwards, it just so happens that he happens to slap himself in the face, his palm ricocheting violently off of his forehead, and that jolt to his neck is enough that he appears on the other side of the wall.
We worked out that if I slapped myself in the forehead, I would temporarily appear as a ghost about 5 meters to my left or something like that.
His body would still remain where it was, in physical space. But his perception was that he left his body behind and kind of managed to go through walls or go look around.
From here, things descend into a bit of chaos. They find that the town has been basically occupied by Lucy's brainwashed villagers, and that Lucy is expecting them. Oh, the 5 of you, together again. I found your friend lying out there in the darkness, and I figured that the few of me could pick him back up and put him back where he belongs. It seems that Lucy was also logged out, so to speak, during the confrontation when Adrian grabbed Liv's arm. It seems that Lucy woke up in many bodies when she surfaced from Tropland into the real world. And she tells them now that she plugged herself back in basically straight away, while the other 4 of her went out and explored the hellish landscape that is apparently reality. And yet, in all of this, she continues, I still haven't been able to talk to GAIRS. Did you find him? The players kind of look at each other. No? I don't believe you. Well, you're gonna have to. Also, for unrelated reasons, we're gonna go to the church now. Oh yeah, the church. I seem to remember that we had some interrupted business going on there before all of that happened. And with that, she takes off into the air and begins to fly in the direction of the church.
She wanted to communicate with GAIRS because at this point we'd established that GAIRS was sort of like a super high level admin basically.
Through various means and various struggles, the players wind up back at the church, where all of this seems to have been culminating. There aren't any people there this time, just the priest, and a quick tap on the chest from Vlad's black cube is enough to make him disappear. Arriving one by one at the church, Lucy is already trying to get through the door. But despite having the powers to apparently fly and teleport, she doesn't seem able to get in. How do I open this door? She stamps her foot angrily.
We obviously didn't have the way to get in because we weren't Adrian or any sort of like high level person. But now that Jamie had discovered his power, that he could kind of shift through doors and stuff. Doors being the key word.
Jamie, with his newfound power, makes his way over and slaps himself in the head and appears on the other side of the door. He only has a few moments to glimpse what's in there. What is it that's been hidden and so highly sought after this entire time? A fountain sits in the middle of a large, empty room, inscribed on its side something which doesn't quite make sense, but has the implications of speak truly to gain an audience. And so he says, hello, I want to speak to GAIRS.
And then
I thought I'd leave out a bit where I spoke to a fountain, but okay.
Well, I thought it would be a good kind of detail to mention.
I'm hurt. So, yes, I spoke to a fountain for a bit, and after deciding that the conversation was not very good, looked at it a bit more and went, oh, speaketh truly, and all of that. So I had to zap back, ask people the password.
You didn't have much time in the room.
No, I had like a few seconds per sort of appearance in the room. So zapped back, asked everyone the password, zapped in after slapping myself in the head, and went, here's the password, and then a person appeared.
The fountain entirely disappears and is replaced by just a guy standing there. Hello, he says. Hello, says Jamie. Are you GAIRS? Yeah, I'm GAIRS.
Did he introduce himself as GAIRS, or did we just
He did,
assume?
yeah. I think you just went, are you GAIRS? And you went, yep.
That's good. That's the kind of straightforward logic I need.
Didn't I have to come into the room at some point?
Remembering her magic symbol she found, which she was able to teleport 1 meter to the side, lines herself up, shoulder against the door, presses the button, and jumps straight through.
Yeah, Liv kind of remembered that she could actually teleport.
Yeah, I'm much better than slapping yourself in the head.
And then I think I teleported through the door. I can't even remember what I asked GAIRS.
What are you doing? What's going on? Did we fix the towers? Yeah, both towers are now fully operational. And I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm trying to make Tropland and reality as close as possible.
His one goal was that he had to bring the reality or what we like the lava land, closer to Tropland.
I don't think we really had any idea. I
don't think anyone realized what was going on until you told us explicitly that GAIRS is changing the world to be like that in the simulation.
Yeah, when we asked him what was going on, and he just told us that right.
Some people might have interpreted that as like, oh, well, you bring the fake world closer to the real world or something like that to make it more realistic.
However, he took it to be the other way around as well, equally.
That also meant bringing the real world closer to the fake world, because his objective was not to bring one to the other, but simply to bring them together.
He was actually trying to replicate the rivers in the real Tropland, which meant he was going to drill holes inside the mountain and create lava flows through the farm and through the village and kill everyone.
Wasn't it because GAIRS was originally in control of Tropland only, and Voltaire was in control of the real world? And because GAIRS' job was limited to the simulation, when he was also put in charge of the real world, obviously he started
too much,
pulling them into line.
Yeah.
Rivers of water, rivers of magma, lava. It doesn't really matter, it's all just fluid at the end of the day. What's important is that there are rivers here, and so there should be rivers there in reality. And now, having been hooked up to Voltaire's whatever that is, he apparently has the power to make Tropland a reality.
It was one of those kind of logical interpretation things, which sounds all very reasonable, like, oh, well, he was trying to make them match. But when you think about it, actually didn't make a lot of sense, because surely for GAIRS, who was in control of the digital world, it would be much easier for him to just change the rivers in the digital world.
Didn't we, whilst this was happening, also convince Lucy that she didn't
need to kill everyone?
Burningly need to go and see GAIRS and kill everything.
Yeah, I think at that point we had a few solutions, didn't we?
No, we didn't. We had nothing.
Well, no, we didn't have any solutions, but like, I remember we tried to persuade, we managed to persuade Lucy to take our side and help us save the whole town and everything.
Yeah, something there. I don't really remember exactly how the conversation went.
I can't remember how exactly we did it, but like there was a few inspirational talks.
But regardless, you ended up back in reality, back at the church. And it's at this point that someone kind of revealed their motive.
Ollie decided to reveal his true intentions as the villain.
Persuade Lucy to just destroy everything or something like that. Or I remember Ollie just had an intention to like destroy everything.
This is where I become the antagonist, I think.
Ollie decided that actually everyone living in the simulation was not actually a good idea. So he made it his mission to try and stop this.
At this point, I realised that Tropland was kind of like a place where the remains of humanity have just gone to sit and decay and await their inevitable deaths. At that point, I realised that the only hope for humanity's like long-term survival was either to pull them out of the simulation somehow, or destroy the simulation, in the hopes that they'd get up off their asses and do some actual saving of humanity.
I know that, well, I personally was like not on board with that particular idea. I know that Ollie was kind of in favour of ending the simulation because it's better to live in the real world.
There had been a few philosophical topics which kind of popped up throughout this. I don't know if we had the full story at this point, but we kind of understood the idea that these townspeople were not AI, they were real people, but over time of being in this kind of state of simulation, their minds had become weaker, in a sense. So they were kind of almost like lobotomized humans.
Oh yeah, of course, because the people in the simulation were slowly losing their cognitive function.
Yeah.
To the point where they were basically becoming NPCs.
So kind of humanity being lobotomized, losing all of its skills.
However, we were evidence that because we were townspeople.
Yeah,
and then we suddenly weren't townspeople anymore.
There were two positions at this point. There was the majority position, which was like, oh, well, we obviously managed to come back from this state of lobotomy, that there must be a way to reverse this for everyone else, so that everyone else can live consciously, in a sense. The second position was the one that Ollie took, and he took it with great force. That that he decided that this was obviously just a terrible existence and humans shouldn't have to exist like this.
Like, it wasn't living. Real life would have been living. Their bodies were slowly decaying. We were malnutrition, like corpses essentially, in the real world. So at that point, I got up and dashed as well as my thin, bony legs would carry me to the church.
I can understand where he's coming from, but I still stand by the point I was arguing probably too forcefully whilst you were doing this, that it should be a decision made by the people involved rather than by Ollie on behalf of all the people that were involved.
Without debate. Everyone's ideas were kind of noble, just in a different way. They just had very different outcomes. And in a sense, I think his position was almost more justified than ours, because the real world obviously had been destroyed to the point it was full of lava. It was just disgusting. It was terrible. So it wasn't a bad idea.
I don't think it's fair for him to arbitrarily go,
"You are wrong.
You're wrong. You're going to die."
Following that, he tried to destroy the control panels.
In the kind of spirit of the game, I smashed the computer screen, thinking that was in charge of the PC, just to give everyone else enough time to fight their own case.
He was going to try and break some more shit with a brick, so we managed to get there just in time. And then I think I had some very, very lucky consecutive rolls to the point where I managed to grab a brick and use the brick on Ollie.
At which point Jamie tried to kill me, I think. Yeah, he tried to bludgeon my head in with a rock.
He's Robert.
I can't remember if we were deciding to carry on breaking him or if we just went, no, it's okay, he's knocked out, that's enough.
Well, I mean, you must have been really kind of biting back the bloodlust from your earlier...
Well, yeah, I hadn't killed anybody for a good, couple of hours at that point, so...
Vlad, I can't remember. He was just on his own adventure for most of it, to be honest.
I stayed because I figured out a plan. I said, I'm gonna change the world inside the simulation so that GAIRS stops changing it inside the real world. I didn't go out after that because I said I'm gonna go and try to, I don't know, dig the holes in or something like that. I remember, but you made the holes massive.
Yeah.
So Vlad was working in the background profusely to kind of save the world, and he did.
Vlad, the only member of the team to actually, talk to any of the villagers who were clearly conscious, clearly, the subset of the population that hadn't been lobotomized.
I tried to persuade the village to help me dig the holes in.
Went and gathered the villagers together and somehow produced 3,000 pickaxes and 3,000 shovels.
Well, originally, didn't we consider throwing the villagers into the lake?
I didn't consider that. I just...
It was Jamie's idea, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To try and block up the exit pipes. No,
I didn't
you
know
knocked the bridges over, didn't you?
Yeah, I think you helped us because I didn't have the very right idea because you made the holes very big, so it was really hard to dig them in. So you helped and said you should divert the bridges and
taking material from the bridges.
Yeah.
To divert the rivers.
Divert the rivers away.
Yeah, because we diverted the rivers in the fake world so that the machines in the real world went, oh, okay, we don't need to make these rivers anymore, we'll stop.
Well, they
send them away
carried on
from...
digging, but they dug them such that the lava would flow past the town.
Yeah.
Yes.
So massively diverted rivers.
People would live.
Take stones from the bridges and use them to plug up the holes in the virtual world. Thereby, they hypothesized, GAIRS would be driven to make the two worlds into one and replicate the blockage in the real world, thus saving the servers and so on and so forth. With a truce momentarily agreed between Ollie, with his somewhat anarchistic, perhaps, maybe merciful, you might say, viewpoint, they set off back in the real world, back to the nearside tower, in search of something that they misplaced earlier.
One of
On the
us
floor,
had
on the ground,
misplaced.
sunken in the ash from after a rather long fall.
Oh, the body that he'd kicked off the tower.
We originally went to try and find the corpse of this man that I'd pushed off. Because I figured, yeah, it would, after a very good roll, I think it was like a 19, we found the corpse.
Because we thought maybe there was something important on that body which had been forgotten. That was Arthur, wasn't it? That was Arthur.
Oh,
the body. Poor Arthur.
Yes.
It was two main things, really. The first was a name tag sewn into the jacket that Arthur was wearing. Yes, this is Arthur. This is that guy who was in that note. The last software engineer of humanity, who apparently had seemingly been fiddling with GAIRS and driven GAIRS somewhat crazy in the process, in the attempt of replacing Voltaire's, whose job it was supposed to be to manage the volcano.
Because he was the only one who reasonably would know how to reverse this, or to stop this at least.
Despite this wonderfully tragic, this beautifully romantic idea that Arthur had gone up these bell towers, scratched out his heartfelt poems about, maybe it would be better off if all of us were dead after all, and then supposedly, sat there and just given up on life and just died sitting there. No, that wasn't at all what had happened. It turns out, cause of death, stabbing.
Yeah.
It was deeply upsetting.
And the only other person we know who could actively leave and had been actively moving around was Adrian.
As soon as we saw that, we thought, oh my gosh, it's Adrian, it's all Adrian, he's evil.
So up they climb, up, and what do they find? Adrian leaning over some previously already fixed pieces of bent metal. And, when he hears them enter the room at the top of the bell tower, he kind of jolts and turns around. Oh, travellers! Oh, it is good you are here. Please come help me with this.
We were like, we have already done this. Why is this broken again?
Someone doth protest too much. Yeah.
So that's it.
So
Adrian was lined up for breaking.
Quickly.
He cracks under the pressure pretty quickly and kind of comes clean. There's nothing left for humanity. The world is hell. Everyone is just slowly dying. Families being killed off by this simulation addiction. It's just best that, we put an end to everything.
And Ollie was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
He said some arguments that I actually agreed with, strangely enough.
His was kind of Ollie's, wasn't it?
I think essentially he'd come to the same conclusion that I had.
Well, his argument was that, with people just in the state that they were, there wasn't any purpose of keeping everyone alive, or anyone alive for that matter. So his goal as well was to try and kill everyone.
Yeah, essentially. So at which point I agreed with him, which doesn't typically happen in D&D. You don't agree with the bad guy. I think this was it was more of a philosophical question as opposed to a binary choice. Yeah. And Liv was trying to argue against me, and I think at one point Jamie, who I think what was his name in the end? Like George Bull was, in reference to how he only liked to make binary decisions, and he decided to throw a rock at Adrian.
Did you brick Adrian?
I think we bricked him.
I think it might have been Jamie. I think you might have.
Yeah. Another high roll, boom. Adrian took a brick to the head.
Can I just say I love that this somehow involved the term like bricking something, like as in bricking technology.
To brick.
Yeah.
To brick is definitely a verb.
Your second name was Boole, but it wasn't just B.
Yeah,
which would have stood for brick.
Yeah, George Brick, that's who I was.
No, it missed him. It missed him thankfully.
And I think we managed to persuade him that that was not the best way to do it. Again, based on the fact that we were kind of living proof that people could come back from this horrible state.
And so events more or less draw to a close. GAIRS has not been stopped, but instead manipulated into diverting the rivers, thus avoiding Tropland and humanity's imminent destruction. Lucy has not been dealt with, but instead persuaded against seeking control over the simulation. And even Adrian narrowly avoided being bricked for his crimes of presumably threatening and eventually murdering humanity's last technically minded asset, thereby bringing about this whole mess. Instead, the travelers take the diplomatic approach, with the intention of making the cognitively intact townspeople aware of their situation. Whether the simulation is shut down, and whether they attempt to recover a foothold back in reality, is unknown. But the player's own miraculous recovery from this VR lobotomy is heralded as a beacon of hope for the future. Hey, thanks for listening. The process of making this long journey into the world of Tropland was incredibly fun. It was such an amazing D&D session, and following that I contacted each person individually, recorded those conversations, and then weaved them together into this one continuous narrative. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And big special thanks to those of you who commented. I've received some pretty good constructive criticism along the way that has been incredibly helpful, and I know I'll keep it in mind for the next time that I do something like this. If you enjoyed this and you would like to hear some closing thoughts from the players and a couple of conclusions from myself, along with some kind of points in the plot that I point out and kind of go over again because I think they're relevant to final thoughts on the moral debate that you've just heard, you can go to Narrative Roleplay YouTube channel, link in the description, where I will be uploading more events like this in the future and hear some closing thoughts from them. Otherwise, if you want to hear more of these things, then go subscribe to Narrative Roleplay. Link is on the screen right now, and hopefully in the next few months or so, we'll see some more events like this going out. So again, thanks for listening. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope you have too.